Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Here we are with episode 109 of Behind the Camera. As always, before we get into today's show, if you would like to follow Behind the Camera across social media, you can find my link tree in the description, which will take you to Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and also has the link to where you can buy my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. This is available in both paperback and ebook, and is free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited. If you would also like to see more of the behind-the-scenes side of the podcast, you can also support the show on Patreon. For £3 a month, you'll get access to extra content, including a Patreon-exclusive series, your name added to the wall of patrons at the end of every episode of Behind the Camera, and much more. But now, getting into today's topic. So today I wanted to get on and talk about the hard truth about streaming versus podcasting. So, as all of you will know, I come from a live streaming background. I was a streamer on Twitch and TikTok for the better part of a year before I started podcasting. And I think whenever I got into podcasting, that was sort of a telltale sign that only one was going to really make it much further, and it wasn't going to be streaming. I think if you ask anybody, they'll tell you that as soon as I started podcasting, they could really see the passion shine through from that. And I do detail this quite heavily in my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. So if this episode does resonate with you, then I would highly suggest picking up a copy if you'd like. $9.99 on Amazon, and also free to read on Kindle Unlimited. But so yeah, I came from this background, and something that I kind of realized more towards like the start of 2026, I was part of a group coaching class with Next Level University for the first 12 weeks of the year. And one of the things that was mentioned was about knowing your audience. And this kind of really got me thinking, and it's stuck with me ever since, because given my background particularly, as a streamer, you know exactly who your audience is. Like, you know them down to the people that they are. Or like you'll recognize their tags or their, online handles, whatever it may be. You'll recognize that, you'll know exactly who's watching you. You'll know the number of people who are tuning into you at any given moment. You'll know the people who come back. You have your communities such as like your Discord and other things, right? With podcasting, it's really not the same. It's so different. Like, that got me thinking. I was like, I think I could only really name 2 people who actually listen to the show. And but it's one of those things. It's because people don't necessarily reach out to you and say, "Oh, I listened to your show; it's really good." Because, well, why would they? You know what I mean? Like, I know I don't listen. I know I don't reach out to all of the hosts of every podcast I listen to, and maybe they think the same thing. I don't know. It's a really different type of audience that you have between streaming and with podcasting. With streaming, it is a very much more a personal, bordering on parasocial at times, but there is a bit more of a personal connection that you get. If you're in a streamer's chat, you're talking to them, they can talk back to you. And that's nice for a lot of people. That's kind of how I really got into it, was just from people being nice to me. And I kind of got invested in the whole thing. But then on the flip side, if anybody was ever a dick, I was like, well, no, I don't want to be a part of this. But with podcasting, you don't really have that. You just have you have your metrics, you have your analytics, you have your demographic. Like, what percentage are male, female, non-binary, etc. What percentage are coming from particular countries and all this. But that's about as far as it goes. Now, people do go deeper into that, and they look into particular things from particular episodes. Like, some episodes might do a lot better than others due to well, there's so many different variables. Like for me, my show is very much reliant on my own audience, my own weekly listeners, and also the listeners or the audience of the guests that I have. And that's why with interview podcasts, some episodes do better than others, depending on who you interview. But yes, that got me really, really thinking. But it's a really strange kind of dichotomy, because whenever I streamed, I didn't feel like I had full autonomy in terms of what I was doing. Now, streaming is an incredibly difficult thing. It's easy to stream, but it's hard to build a community. It's hard to really make something of it, especially given the fact that if you have over a small number of viewers concurrently on like Twitch, you're within the top 5%. I don't know the exact figures, but it's something along those lines. You don't really need to be much, but to be considered in the top 5%. But the difference between the top 5% and the top 1% is absolutely astronomical. You're talking either you're an overnight success or years and years of grinding. It's really kind of, there's no two ways about it, really. But whenever I started streaming, all I wanted to do was I wanted to grow it. I wanted to create my own community. I wanted to grow it. Did I want it to become my full-time source of income? Probably not. But I wanted it to open up doors to do other things. I wanted to do loads of collaborations. There was so much I wanted to do with it. I actually wanted to do more variety, but I kind of ran into a few problems. And that is with the one of the main general problems that streamers have is that you can very, very quickly get known for streaming one particular thing. And I knew that when I was going into it, and I wanted to do variety, as I say, but I also kind of knew that there was going to have to be one main thing that I was going to be doing, because you need that kind of consistency. You need, if you play something that you really want to play and it gets you a high number of viewers right from the very start, you're going to want to keep that going. You're going to want more people to come back and bring more people along the way, and then let it build from there. And then once you kind of establish that, bring in the variety. That's what I tried to do when I started, and it started off okay. And it did grow quite nicely. But as I say, the problem is, there was that, and also another issue was the time I started streaming. So I started streaming in 2023. This was a time where TikTok had, more or less, it was around the time TikTok had implemented the 1,000 follower barrier to go live. So then I started on Twitch and slowly moved over to TikTok when I was able to. But more people were kind of getting wise to the whole, I'm just going to buy followers. So you sort of kind of saw people who had never put out a single video, but they were just paying £4, £5, whatever it was, for 1,000 followers so they could go live. And TikTok's discoverability is much, much better. So then I was kind of late to the TikTok game, but I already kind of established everything over on Twitch. And herein lies the third problem, was with my team of moderators. And this is by no means a fuck you to them. This is not me shitting on them, because everything that kind of happened is just as much to do with me than anything else. But I felt that there was somewhat of a gatekeeping nature with a lot of the people who were in my core audience, and including some of my moderators on Twitch. Very much so, to the point where it was like, I'd be like, look, whenever new people come into a chat, they want to be, the streamer can only do so much. They want the chat to be really nice so they feel welcome coming in, because if you watch live streams, that you will know this yourself. If you go into a live stream and the streamer's nice but the chat are absolute dicks, you're not going to want to stay there. You're not going to want to stay there. And I live by that in terms of streaming. So I asked this one thing. A couple of people did it, in all fairness. They actually they were very, very helpful with that. But then others particularly were not. And I can only really, I don't want to say it was in any way vindictive, but it sort of was like, well, why couldn't you just do that? But again, it's just a small thing. And then I moved over to TikTok, and I was kind of dual streaming at the same time. It didn't really do much for me, but had better days, some better days than others. And again, it was fine as always. I think that's to be expected when you start dual streaming, when you only have that kind of small following. And then, you have people who don't want to move over from one platform to another. And that's totally fine. But one thing I kind of found was that if I was giving more focus, if it seemed that way, if I was giving more focus over to one platform, then people would just drop out altogether. And, again, that's fine. And there's a very sort of difficult thing behind being a streamer. And that is ultimately, yes, you are a source of entertainment for people. Yes, there can be, you can get to know a lot of the people who consistently watching you. You can build friendships and all. And of course, in the sort of sad ways, it does get to the point where sometimes things become very, very parasocial. But that's on you to kind of draw those boundaries, protect yourself and everyone else. But people are only going to watch you if they like what you're doing. And people will say, it doesn't matter what you're doing, I'm there for you. And that's something that's easier to say than actually to live up to, because the thing is, people will say that and they think they're being nice, but ultimately, and I've seen this before, people have said that to me. It's like, no matter what you're streaming, I'll be there watching. And I could have done something different. And all you get is complaints or, no, this isn't for me, so I'm going. And it's like, well, that's fine. But don't tell me that you're going to be there regardless. If you're there for the streamer, don't say that if you're not going to be there for you're playing something they don't like. So that was something that I kind of came across multiple times. And then I kind of felt like I was in this little box that I couldn't really do much else than what it was that particular people liked, because and I guess I just kind of not started to get bored of it, but I got in my own head with streaming more than I should have. And like I say, I talk about this in the book. I felt like I was constantly competing with other people, because the more people that you meet on a similar kind of level with a similar viewership / similar following, whatever it may be, the more people you meet, the more your communities are very likely to align in some ways. And it was even one of my moderators on Twitch said to me, I find it very difficult to just sit in one stream. I feel like I have to go and say hello to everybody. And I just simply said, you don't. Be where you want to be. Don't, if you feel like you have to go and do it, that kind of means that you don't want to, but you're doing it out of obligation when you have none. But just be where you want to be. And I think that's, yeah, you see this all the time. Like I still watch like a lot of live streamers on TikTok, and you can't really scroll more than like 5 people and you're going to see the same people in different people's chats. Like it really is like a whole tight knit community, depending on the sort of game that is in question. But I see this all the time. And So when I stopped, I stopped and had a conversation with somebody about it. And, it's kind of funny because like part of the reason that I stopped was because I felt like the support that I did have before just was no longer there. And I didn't do it for those types of reasons. I didn't do it because I wanted that kind of support. I wanted the recognition. I didn't do it because of that. But I kind of felt as though it was a case where I was told one thing and then it was really kind of the opposite that was the truth. And I kind of just felt a little bit hurt by it. And it's actually funny because the reason I'm making this episode is because I've had people turn to me before, like in recent months, and say, it's kind of crazy because I only really know you from doing the podcast, but I never actually got to see you stream. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I can do about that. And, people have asked me, if I would ever consider going back. People have told me they would love to see me go back. But the truth is, I don't feel welcome in that space anymore. Like I don't feel like I could go back and be comfortable in that space again. And I would love to be, but I just don't feel like I could be. And the longer this goes on, the less interested I am in doing it as well. So I'm kind of like a comfort in that sense as well. But even ever since I stopped, my old moderators, a couple of them said to me, I would love it. I'd love to see you stream again. And I'm just like, well, but everybody who was there kind of just ditched me to go and do something else, especially while I was streaming. So why would you want to come back? Why would you want me to come back if that's just the case? And I was told, well, because you pretty much ditched it before everybody else did. And that's probably true. That's probably true. I know my heart wasn't in it for a long time. For pretty much the entire of 2025. My heart just wasn't in streaming. I kind of knew there was a point where I just wasn't going to go back. I just didn't know when. Now, I did have a lot of other difficulties that year, but it really just sort of, the way kind of everything fell down. And then like, even to this day, it's still just, oh yeah, I would love to see a stream. Like, I don't know. I take it with a pinch of salt. I don't think it's something I could ever go back to. And, I did have passion for it. I had a lot of passion for it. I have always been a creative through and through for as long as I can remember. I've always liked creating things. I've always liked kind of being in the space of entertainment. And I kind of felt like I thrived there for a while. It certainly give me that kind of confidence that I never had when I was a kid, or when I was kind of older, like in my teens, growing up into my adulthood, I suppose. It gave me that kind of confidence that I lacked. It really just sort of helped me develop in ways that I didn't know I could. And what's interesting to me is the fact that doing behind the camera has been probably the best thing I've ever decided to do. And I love it. I want to do it for as long as I physically can. But doing this over 100 episodes, I feel like I found my voice. I feel like I don't get nervous anymore. I've spoken to famous people before and I don't really get nervous. I just enjoy it because they're just people too. But comparing this to the last time I actually streamed, oh my God, the last time I actually streamed was, I want to say it was like the start of November 2025. I only did like an hour, something like that. But oh my days, I was so nervous. I just hated every minute of it. And that was the sort of point where I knew that was going to be it for me. That was the point I knew it was going to be it for me. I did get like a decent turnout. I got like, my old moderators, they were all very happy to see me. And that was nice. That was nice. But I think it was one of those things where I kind of maybe tried to get back into a little bit too late. Now, I only did that just to see if, there was something missing, and truthfully, there wasn't, and that was my first stream that I'd done in about 4 months at that point. But one of the sort of saddest things for me that I think came from the whole transition going over to podcasting full-time online comparison to streaming at the same time was I feel like I've lost friends because of it. I feel like the people who I was really, really close with, that relationship's just not there anymore. And it's very much oh yeah, good on you for doing something you love. Pats on head. In a sort of, I don't want to say patronizing kind of way, but it almost kind of feels like, it's good that you're doing something you enjoy, but I would much rather you be doing this instead. I would take more interest in it. I'd much rather you be streaming. And, that could be something I'm just making up in my own head, but from when I started this and when I was streaming at the same time, I did notice that there was very significantly less interest in the podcast than there was in streaming. So whenever I stopped streaming altogether, I kind of felt like, the people I was closest to really were only kind of there for me as a streamer. And that's fine because that's how it all started. But I almost felt like the interest in terms of what I was doing with the podcast, even though it was something I was like a lot more passionate about, just kind of got completely overlooked. And that's fair because it's not always going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it is kind of isolating in a way. And maybe I have isolated myself. Maybe I've just kind of took everything and thought about it in the most possible, like the worst possible way, just kind of thinking, oh, well, this is how it appears, so this is how it must be. Maybe that's kind of the mindset that I've taken to this completely inadvertently, but that's certainly how it feels, and even my friends in real life, unless I get somebody famous who they've heard of on the show, there's no interest. And again, they're not podcast people. They don't have to be. And this isn't me saying that like, people have to do this, because if you're friends, you have to, take interest in what your friends are doing, because that's not the case. I mean, be happy for them doing something that they find their passion in, of course. You don't necessarily have to, take on the same interest if it's not for you. But I think what's kind of happened with me is that it's been very much like I said before, it's been very much a kind of, all right, well, we'll just maybe wait and see if he wants to go back and do something that's entertaining to us. And there's a lot of people who I haven't spoke to in such a long time since I stopped streaming. There's people in my real life who, since I started streaming, went into podcasting on like barely, I don't feel like I have half the relationship with them anymore because my interests are so different. And I think it just kind of, when you kind of realize that and when it hits you, it's kind of just like it's really scary. But I wouldn't change anything about my podcasting journey. I wouldn't change anything about it for the world. I feel like there's a lot more I have to offer with this for streaming. And I think it's just kind of part of it where, not everybody will be there the entire length of your journey. Your journey is going to take many different shapes and forms. Your journey is going to go in so many different directions, and the people along the way are all going to be different. Something that I've learned about the podcasting community is 90% of them are some of the most supportive and amazing people you will ever meet. They're just fantastic. You can put up something about a podcast and they will literally just really champion you. Be like, yes, you're getting out here and doing this. That is incredible. I love this. You don't really get that with streamers. You really don't get that with streamers. With streaming, it's it can be very much a stay in your own lane type thing. It really can be a sort of, I saw you do this and it did quite well, but because I've got a bigger following, I'm going to do it and it's going to go even better for me kind of thing. And I'm not going to give you the credit for me having seen this in the first place. So there's no real originality, and I don't want to go as far as to say people will step on you, because not everybody is that vindictive. Not everybody is that kind of really out to get anybody, but I don't really feel like the same level of support is there with streaming than there is with podcasting. But then it takes on so many different shapes and sizes. I certainly felt very supported for the most of the time that I was streaming. Then I kind of felt that dwindle a little bit, and I kind of just felt like, okay, if I just stopped streaming, nobody would notice. And the problem with that is I kind of felt like I was proved right. Maybe not. Maybe nobody voiced it, but at the same time, I think people just respected my decision. And you know, it's one of those things. I wish I could go back to it. I wish I could feel like I could go back to it, but right now I don't feel like I could. I don't feel like I would feel too awkward going back into it right now. Do I want to though? That's a whole other question, because I think wanting to do it, that should be the first thing that you think of. And right now I don't want to do it. I am incredibly happy doing what I'm doing with the podcast. I have a lot of plans for the future, and I feel like the future is a lot brighter in terms of behind the camera than it ever was with AndyGames_94. But that is not to say I'm not grateful for everything that happened for me as a Twitch streamer. As a Twitch streamer, this is what kind of got me into what I do today. So if there was never an AndyGames_95, there would never have been a behind the camera podcast. So despite the fact there were some painful lessons to learn, there was some hard truths, there was a lot of struggles, and I did have to build. I had to rebuild from day one. Like, there was an element where I had to rebuild from day one because just of the way things went with the podcast initially in this first 6 months, and that's okay. But a lot of hardships, but I think ultimately it's turned out to be very, very worth it. I say there are things I'm sad about. There are things I'm very, very sad about, you know, especially with the people side of it, but I certainly think that's not something that has to remain permanent. That's I think things like that are things that can always be fixed. That has been the hard truths and painful lessons that I learned leaving streaming and going on to podcasting. That was episode 109 of Behind the Camera. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to all patrons for your support. You're all truly appreciated. And of course, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, you can check out my link tree in the description for all socials and my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.